Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Sperging Out Podcast. My name is Mitch Grace. I am the author of the book Growing Up with Asperger's Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom, available on Amazon right now on Kindle and paperback. I am working on the audiobook format, which will be released at a later date. And our previous episode, we mentioned that sometimes we're going to just, instead of splitting our episodes into two parts, one of us discussing something autism related or something, something that's going on in our lives, and just, one half of us just screwing around. The last episode was just us discussing one subject regarding autism, and that was my pre-evaluation packet that I had to fill out and the subjects that went along with it. That was an autism-only episode. Today is only going to be an episode where we are just screwing around. We're going to be talking about a piece of media that my co-host extraordinaire actually introduced me to, and I'm so glad he did because I've played it twice. Yeah. Spoilers, it is a video game, and it is excellent. So, co-host extraordinaire, take it away.
Well, hello, I'm co-host extraordinaire. I do in-home therapy, and I'm a Kim Kusanagi enjoyer. God bless that man. So the game we're talking about is called Disco Elysium. It is a unique game that is even hard to describe now. There's so much in it. It has more dialogue and more text than most other games, if not any other game. It has like 5 times as much as The Witcher 3, for context, if you know how much dialogue's in that game.
Wow, I did not know that.
It is an isometric CRPG minus the combat. You go around, you're a detective in a fictional city of Revachol, and you are there to solve a murder. But you went on a drunken, drug-fueled bender the night before after arriving, and you don't remember anything. So you wake up, room's destroyed, you're completely naked, you have the worst hangover of your life, you have no idea who you are or what's going on, and your partner has just arrived, Kim Kusanagi from another district, and he is a straight-laced, super serious detective. So that's the opening of the game. And it's just you kind of learning about this world and the people in it and the murder mystery within it. And the main draw is that you have RPG-like stats, but all of them are characters with their own personality that talk to you. So if one stat's really high, it will just constantly interrupt you and talk to you, which can actually become more of a problem than helping. So if your encyclopedia stat's really high, you'll just start randomly throwing out facts during conversation, and people will be really off-put by you, which makes it harder to be a detective. So the game has this very intricate dialogue system with lots of different routes, and just every time you play through it, it feels completely different because of all the different things you can do, all the different ideas you can have, all the different builds you can have. And the game's just gorgeous.
Yes, so to elaborate, this game, how do I describe it? I've described it as a point and click. Because it is very point and clicky, but your points about it being isometric and whatnot are all very true. The one thing I do need to say right now before we go any further, we will be going into full spoilers.
Yeah.
Because not every playthrough is exactly the same. There are a few things that are the same, and such as different endings, etc., etc. But yes, the area you participate in, the city of Revachol, and then your partner Kim Kitsuragi.
Yeah, I was saying his name wrong. I was thinking of Ghost in the Shell.
Oh, I haven't seen that. The dialogue system is like Witcher 3's or a BioWare game or an RPG on steroids, and it's worth pointing out that when the game was initially released, the dialogue in the game was not spoken.
No voice.
It was all, no voice acting. It was all reading. The developers did release a final cut for free for people that have already purchased the game, where they added a few extra things, and the entire game is now voice acted. And
brilliantly done, too. The voice acting's fantastic.
Yes, bear in mind, so you, co-host extraordinaire, you played the game when there was no voice acting, correct?
Yes. So it feels like the amount of text is like a visual novel on steroids. And I don't like visual novels. I don't even really read books that often. I prefer audiobooks. But the dialogue and the writing in the game is so good. I read hours and hours of dialogue, and I loved every second of it.
Yes. So you read the game, for lack of a better term. I played the game when the final cut was already released. So I didn't have the experience where it was just text. I got the full voice acting, and I cannot imagine playing this game without the voice acting.
The voice
it is
acting,
so good.
it adds so much flavor to the stats because they all have different voices, and it just feels so good.
Yes, and then the murder mystery itself. I mean, that is the initial, I guess, inciting incident. But as you explore Revachol a bit more, you encounter more. I would say NPCs, but that would imply that they don't have anything to say. No, these people. Almost every character has something meaningful to say or ties into a quest at some point.
Yeah. All the dialogue is world building and done in the best way possible. Where like every character you talk to, even if they just say throwaway dialogue, it still informs you about the world you're in, the current political landscape, the current social landscape, and it's just so engaging because it's a unique setting, but it's so tied to real life philosophy and politics that you can make all the connections and you can empathize with everything that's happening, despite it being a completely fictionalized setting.
Oh yes, and then the developers of the game, are they French?
No, they're Slavic, but I don't know what part. I want to say Polish, but I could be wrong.
Because you get a variety of acts. The developers are European. All of the voice acting was done in-house in the studio, so there are no big name voice actors. You're not going to get a Nolan North or a Troy Baker or a Tara Strong or anything.
They feel natural, like actual people.
Yes, and you get such a variety of accents. You get English accents, you get French accents. I mean, your partner Kim Kitsuragi, he is an Asian-looking man, but he has a French accent, and so we're going into full spoilers. Harry Dubois, that is a French name if I've ever heard one, and so this. Oh, it's so... And then you also get, like, American Southern accents in there with one of the characters. It's like, wow, where did this come from? But it all blends so perfectly. And to your point about, they're about real-life political philosophies in it. Like, there's capitalism, there's communism, there's authoritarianism, there's dictatorships, there's racism. Fascism, etc. So, co-host extraordinaire, what would you say... Is there a specific section or sequence in the game that is your favorite?
Oh, that's so tough. Like every moment of that game. I think that the very opening of the game is so brilliant, so fantastic. But there is a lull right after the opening when you first meet Kim and you're just doing the like bare minimum like investigation work. But once you start actually having a path to go down on the investigation and things in the city start changing, like the strike gets worse, everything feels good. The moment your stats start to really have personalities, that's it. The number one moment is when volition starts to talk to you about how you've been lied to. There's a moment in the game where your volition stat will just be like, all of your other stats have been lying to you about this. She's a pretty woman and your dumb man brain can't handle it. Don't listen to them. And every time you talk to this woman, your stats will just straight up be like, yeah, she's telling the truth. And then volition will be like, don't trust them. It's such a good scene and really like fully implements the fact that your stats are characters. And sometimes your stats are just wrong or not helpful. And you have to be able to like parse that or just engage with it and be wrong. Like you can make a character who's just a horrible turbo nerd and is just annoying and no one likes them and still play from beginning to end of the game and still enjoy every moment of it because it creates a narrative, a personality, a flavor to the playthrough. And then you can load the game up and make your character completely different and have a completely different feel. My first playthrough, I put too many points into visual calculus, which is your ability to like kind of judge, distances and stuff. And my character started imagining what things were like inside buildings from outside. He was imagining the interior of buildings using visual calculus, and he was completely wrong. You'd open the door and be like, that's not what it looks like in here. I'm actually having a schizophrenic break. My character's going psychotic. Because I put too many points in visual calculus. I had another one where I put too many points in one of the empathy-based stats, and my character started talking to inanimate objects. Just left and right. Just like, oh yeah, the mailbox is talking to me today. And it's like, no, Harry, it's a mailbox. You gotta calm down. You cannot talk to inanimate objects in public. People are gonna think you're weird. It's great.
Yes, what's the one ability where like like you can see things that the wind tells you about. Shivers, yes.
That one's baller. At first, you're like, this is such a weird ability. I don't understand what it does. And then suddenly Harry's like, there's something to the east. I can feel it. And you're like, oh, I'm psychotic. Then you go to the east and you do find something. You're like, oh, this skill's legit. This skill is actually having like a psychic power, a sixth sense. If you max it out, though, you do start just giving random signals and directions. And you're like, okay, now I'm just lost because Shivers is telling me to go in random directions.
So the twists and turns, I think my favorite segment of the whole game is right after the climax. And
yes,
so
that segment is so moody, so good.
So the climax, because my favorite segment is after the climax. The climax itself is when there's a standoff. So the murder, there are mercenaries in town meant to quell the strike, and one of them was murdered. The townsfolk decide, okay, let's make it look like we murdered him instead of what actually happened, and because we don't know what actually happened, and then we'll just hang it up there, we'll just move on with it, and hopefully the mercs will forget it. The mercs did not forget that.
Yeah, the townsfolk wanted to like frame themselves as like almost like a threatening posture to go with the strike, but that backfires because then the mercenaries are like, okay, we'll just kill you all. And
so you and Kim Kitsuragi are literally standing in between the townsfolk and the mercenaries, and it's like, okay, literally everything in this game is building towards this moment. Like your relationship with Kim, your stats in specific categories, and it's like, hey, in the game, there are consequences. Like, like people, like characters die. Kim could die. You could die. It is, and that is a game over. There is no starting over. That's how your story ends.
Yes.
And so, while all of that is fantastic, and the music is just so perfect, and a little touch. I mean, it's not a little touch, but the head mercenary at this point is a huge bulking dude who you can encounter and talk to prior to the standoff. And his character portrait, when he's disguising himself in the strike, is one thing, but once the standoff happens, his character portrait is different, and it's in a much darker, and it sets the mood perfectly. And you're like, oh god. And then the whole twist of there's a third merc. How did we not see him?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here? So just everything is hitting the fan so brilliantly.
Yeah, and they're all in full body armor and fully kitted out with guns, which the townsfolk have nothing.
Yes, and so characters who were very antagonistic towards you at one point are now like, hey, they are in your corner right now.
Yeah,
so it's
they need help.
And the climax itself is fantastic. The meeting with the deserter, who the actual murderer of the mercenary, who kickstarts this whole thing. That whole sequence is, I mean, the puzzle solving that. Up now, since I've done it twice, it genuinely feels like padding.
Yes, the puzzles at the very end of the game are padding. But they're building a tone and a mood, and you're slowly building up to this big mystery of, oh, we're going to find the murderer. And you find him, and spoilers, he's just a guy who is really bitter about his own personal life and his past and his own unfulfilled life. And he shot the mercenary out of pure jealousy over a woman. Has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with the world. It's just a random murder. But that random murder was the catalyst for all of this political intrigue, this strike. There's so much going on that's based around the world, and it all stemmed from just a sad old man who was bitter.
Well,
he tells you he did it because of communism, but it's very clear he's lying. He did it because he was jealous about a guy having sex with a woman. It's such an engaging way of framing it.
I do think he was telling the truth when it was about communism, but it was more of a mask, where it's like, he was, so to give you a whole lot of backstory, Revachol was taken over by communists, and the deserter, the murderer, was a member of that communist squad that attacked the city, but when he didn't realize the war was over. And so he just like, all right, well, all my squad's dead. I'm gonna have to, under the guise of night, I'm gonna have to, sneak my way through the city just to get food and whatnot. And then that woman who the mercenary slept with, he started developing a fascination with her because he had a very high-powered scope on his rifle. And so he started becoming obsessed. He became a simp, and that's when he shot the mercenary. But the game also implies that, and I didn't see this coming.
Oh,
when
yeah.
my first playthrough, I did not see this coming.
I feel like that's mostly that this part's like more of a joke than a serious thing. It's fun, and it fits the theme of the game with the sci-fi elements that interweave in, where like at first you don't realize the game has sci-fi elements, and the more you play it, you're like, wait, they're talking about actual like magic data transportation. This is a real sci-fi element that everyone just treats as normal.
Right, and so that, as well as, so there's a random side quest where you can help like insect watchers.
It's a cryptozoologist.
Yes, that.
They look for cryptids.
And so they're like, oh, we're certain this cryptid is here. And so you help them out.
And they seem crazy the whole time. And your partner tells you you're wasting your time and they're crazy the entire time.
But then as you are talking to the deserter, that cryptid shows up and begins speaking to you via telepathy or something.
Yeah.
And it's implied that the mere presence of this cryptid was driving the deserter insane.
Yeah, causing psychosis.
And so, depending on your choices throughout the game, you can actually get proof of this cryptid existing, or you're shit out of luck.
Yeah.
And so, just that whole sequence is so good. And then on top of that, it's followed up by another incredible sequence where Harry Dubois' cop buddies are like, hey, you've done some shit. This is a tribunal.
Yeah.
And like all of your past actions can come back to haunt you. How you've treated Kim, how you've interacted with those cop buddies who are in terrible disguises, how many substances you've consumed, because there's a mechanic in the game where if you take certain substances, it can temporarily boost certain stats.
Yeah, there's a whole build around just being drunk and high the whole game. You get a thought cabinet like class setup that's just based around like, yeah, you're just under the influence the entire game from beginning to end.
It's so it's so good.
So
and then
much depth. Go ahead.
I was just gonna talk more about the ending. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, there at that tribunal, there's a lot of interesting dialogue. So like in my first playthrough, I adamantly told people, no, I'm not a communist. But whenever workers' rights came up, I was like, yeah, we should really take the power from these capitalists. Workers deserve better treatment and rights. And at the end of the game, they're like, yeah, you're a communist. And I was like, no, I'm not a communist. I've been saying I'm not a communist. And the game goes, yeah, but you have all these communist beliefs. And the game actually actively fights against what you're saying to show you what your actions were. So the game will be like, you did all of these things, and you said these specific things to these people. These are all communist ideology. You can say you're not a communist, but you did all of these things. And it's such an interesting way to like focus on the player almost losing control, where it's like, no, your actions speak louder than your words, the dialogue choices. You can't just talk your way out of your own actions, which is such a cool concept, just like real life.
And then with in my first playthrough, I was completely neutral on all political things. And so whenever the tribunal happens, they're like, you're a fucking moralist. What the hell's wrong with you? And I'm just like,
enlightened, centrist, moralist.
and so they give you shit for it. And so I'm like, damn, that's fascinating.
Moralist, you cringe. Yes, the game also, just to be clear, the game touches on all these different ideologies and political and social topics, but it touches on them fairly. It doesn't have any specific preference. It isn't pro-communism, it isn't pro-capitalism, it isn't pro-moralism. It kind of pokes fun at all of them and makes a point to show how there are good things in all of these ideas and terrible things in all of these ideas. So like in my communism playthrough, my first one, despite the fact that like obviously I'm for workers' rights and stuff, it still repeatedly showed me like, yeah, but like you can't have a functional system like that. There needs to be some innovation or some pressure. There needs to be some overhead authority. And it constantly reminded you that, like, showing the failings of communism left and right, which is just such a great way to do, like, writing, where it's like, it doesn't matter what ideology you focus on, it's not playing favorites.
I also, like, it even pokes fun at monarchies. Like, there's, like, so...
You can be a monarchist.
So, like, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Revachol was under the rule of a king, and when the communists invaded, the king... I can't remember. Did the king actually fight, or did he just do nothing and the city took over?
I don't remember.
So
I'm pretty sure he did nothing.
So, in the game, you can see that there are loyalists to the king still. They're like, oh, the king's amazing, but when you actually look at actual historical documents, they say the king was a shithead.
Yeah,
the king was a dipshit. Yeah, and so it shows what blind loyalty to a monarch can do to people.
And rose tinted glasses.
Yes.
So many, almost, it feels like half the people in town are rose-tinted about the past, nostalgic for how things were so much better before. But then we start reading about the history, you're like, you were at war before, and there are still giant potholes where bombs went off and killed people in town. It wasn't better before. Shit was bad. You just have rose-tinted glasses. It's so good.
On the subject of the craters, let's actually talk about the setting itself, because you get a variety of locales in this game, and like you get a harbor, you get a I was gonna say a town, but I guess a town.
Yeah, you get like a harbor, a town, a little swamp area, and then like
an area in the boonies.
And then like a freight cargo ship near the harbor.
Right, and then the climax. Well, I guess the post climax takes place on an island you have to get on a specific thing for, and that is its own thing. It's like a former artillery base.
Yeah, there's like a bunker and like cannons set up.
Mm-hmm. And like there's these old buildings that, like, this is one of the reasons why visual calculus is one of my favorite abilities, which is because there are instances where like you'll see a worn down like a billboard or advertisement, and using visual calculus you can be like, oh, I know what that used to say. Yeah. And so I think and just the visuals of the visual calculus doing its thing, oh, it's brilliant. I love it so much. And then
did you during the mercenary part, did you use visual calculus to fight back?
No, I never got that prompt.
If you have a loaded gun, you can use the gun during the mercenary part to shoot one of the mercenaries at the very beginning using visual calculus to dodge their incoming fire right afterward. It's actually the coolest. Your volition, the last thing volition says before the shooting starts is like, you can win this, and you can't. That's also the nail in the head, is like the mercenaries are better equipped, better armed. There's no stopping them. You can just kind of minimize the damage they're doing, but the game doesn't tell you that. You just constantly are like, no, if I do this, I'll save everyone. If I do this, I'll save everyone. If I do this, I'll save everyone. But you can't save everyone. You can't do everything perfectly. It's a cool concept. I like the idea of being met with an insurmountable challenge, but still everyone reacting to how you tried to solve the problem.
I also love it how in the climax, like the game. So my first playthrough, I tried to talk the mercenaries down.
That's what I did too.
Like there was a point where it's like I gave an option and I got the dice roll. I succeeded, and there was the next dialogue for the head mercenary. Like he does pause for a bit, but his gun's still loaded. His gun is still pointing at you, and he's still drunk. And so it gave me a bonus on like a potential dialogue option. It's like, hey, you made him pause. He's kind of hesitating.
Yes, he shoots into the air, and you realize the way he shoots in the air is like him like actually like being like, oh wait, maybe you are right. And so it's so good.
And then in my playthrough, like there's a point where one of the stats says, hey. The mercenary shoots in the air, and the guy says, "Hey, there's not going to be another warning shot. He's going to shoot and kill someone. You need to do something.
You need to take action. You can't talk your way out of this."
And so, the personality stat tells me this. I still have other dialogue options, but it's still like I have to shoot him. This thing is telling me to shoot him, so I'm going to shoot him. And then the climax happens, and all the shots happening, and then the Kim Kitsuragi roll check.
There's so many.
And then the whole Kim points his gun. He's like, God, please, and it calls back to when you shoot the guy, the dead merc, down from the tree, and the whole thing was like he can't trust his eyesight, and that's why Kim says, God, please.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
And he threads. Oh, it's so like everything about that mercenary section is probably also my favorite. Like it's just so well done. Like. In my first playthrough, I didn't actually get my necktie off the ceiling fan because of my dexterity or flow de grace. I can't remember. One of my stats was too low. I just couldn't get it off the fan. I'm too stupid and lazy. So I just played through the entire game without the necktie because I thought it's just a necktie. Second playthrough, I get the necktie, and it immediately starts talking to me. And it's a psycho little anarchist who wants me to just burn the world down and break things and kill people left and right. And you're like, oh, my necktie's a psycho. Okay. And then at the end of the game, the necktie's like, this is it. This is the moment. Use me. And you can shove the necktie in a bottle and make a Molotov cocktail and take out one of the mercenaries at the very end. Using a Molotov cocktail. Your necktie goes out in a blaze of glory thanking you for it. He's like, really? Finally.
Which mercenary?
The main guy.
Really?
Yeah, you light him up.
Interesting.
I assume he survives, but I don't know. It stops him from shooting you.
Interesting, because there's in the two playthroughs there are two ways Harry can get shot. There's one is in the leg,
Yeah.
and if you get the leg armor, then it bounces off. And the other one is in shoulder armor, which I didn't get the leg armor, but the shoulder armor actually, I think it's I forget who it is, but Harry gets shot in the shoulder, and then that actually bounced off.
Yes.
And so there is a way in the game where you can have both bullets that come at you that you can't dodge bounce off of you.
Yeah, if you have the full mercenary armor, which requires you to do a lot of questionable things and go really the extra length to be like, yeah, I got full mercenary armor. And even Kim's like, why are you wearing that? You stole some of that off a dead body. That's kind of, I'm going to have to report this. And you're like, whatever, bro. But yeah, you can become bulletproof for that final shootout. You still get knocked out, but you don't get shot.
And so the Molotov cocktail, because you told me about the Molotov cocktail previously, I thought that was when, because like I think depending on how late in the game you go to that section of the map, you can meet a graffiti artist. And towards the climb, I think after the mercenary section, she writes her whole graffiti manifesto, and you can actually light it on fire. I thought when you said Molotov cocktail, I thought that's what you were referring to.
No, you use it on the mercenaries.
I had
during
no
the
idea
climax.
about. I had no idea about that.
You can use the gun. You can talk them down a little bit. You can do that. I think there's even you can use melee, depending on your build and just what you have with you at the time.
Interesting.
It's just there's so many different ways that whole scenario can go down, and I love that the next day there are genuine consequences to what happens. Like
People
you
could
can't
die.
stop the mercenaries entirely, but depending on how you handle the situation, the people in town will talk to you different, treat you differently, and Kim may or may not be there. Like there's certain characters can just die during that scene, like citizens in town, and the next time you come back, they're just dead, and people blame you for it. Like you could have done better. And it's so good.
In both of my playthroughs, the first one, a bunch of the Hardy Boys, I think that's what they're called.
Yeah.
A bunch of the Hardy Boys die,
Ooh.
but the main one doesn't. The orange hat guy. I'm blanking on his name. But so like when you go downstairs after I was told that, hey, Kim's in critical condition, we don't know if he's gonna pull out. And then Kuno was just like, hey, you little bitch. And I'm just like, why did it have to be you?
Kuno.
And so Kuno's a character of the is a character name, by the way.
He's a kid.
So you can actually, what's the word? So that guy, the main Hardy boy, like, he's obviously sad that his comrades died, but he doesn't blame you. He's actually like, hey, thanks for stepping in.
Yeah,
like,
thanks
it
for
sucks
trying.
it sucks that these guys died, but thanks for stepping in because more people could have died.
Yeah.
And then in my second playthrough, which was the best playthrough I've got so far, which case so I get the first shot off at the mercenary, and I think, in this playthrough I miss my first shot of the and so my first playthrough I shoot the mercenary, it hits him in his chin, he falls to the ground, and he gets a shot off at me and it hurts me. In this second playthrough, I shoot at the mercenary, I miss, and the mercenary's like, okay, boom. And he shoots me in the leg or the chest or whatever, and it bounces off. But Kim, realizing, it's shit's going down, he points his gun at the other mercenary, shoots them, kills them, and then. But I think the main mercenary shoots at me again, hits me, and I'm on the ground, and so, but I black out, but I'm able to pass the Kim Kitsuragi roll a check, and so I'm able to say, hey, Kim, look out. And so, Kim's able to fend off the third mercenary and kill her. And so, but in that playthrough, the only Hardy Boy that died was the lawyer.
Yeah.
And so to context, this lawyer kind of lies to you by omitting the fact that she's a lawyer in the very beginning of the game.
Yeah, she tries to fly under the radar. And
she's very much a bitch towards you.
Yeah, she actively inhibits you and works against you.
And so when she dies, I'm like, I'm not exactly shedding any tears.
Yeah, I want to say she always dies because I don't think I've ever had her survive.
My first playthrough, she survives.
Oh, so I guess it's her or the Hardy Boys. Oh, man.
And so when I go down there, and this time Kim's with me, and, it's one of the quote-unquote better endings. The Hardy Boys are like, hey, thanks for stepping in. We were able to swarm the main mercenary and kill him. But yeah, no, Eliza or whatever, she's dead, and we're heartbroken over it.
Oh wow,
And
yeah.
then, of course, Harry, I'm clicking the dialogue options to be like, hey, we did our job. We're sorry we couldn't save her. And they're like, oh, it's fine, it's fine. But in my own personal mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm not upset that she's dead. She was a bitch. Fuck her.
Yeah. I remember when I got to the Hardy Boys in my second playthrough, the one where I used the Molotov, they were like, they were hyping me up. They were like, you stood between those mercenaries, that was badass. And you're like, yo, people are dead, but thank you. Like,
that is awesome.
yeah,
man.
they were cheesed. They thought I was the coolest dude.
So, another thing I love about this game is that at a certain point, the game says, okay, this game essentially gives you two main quests. One is to interview the union boss who's on strike, and then the corporate negotiator who's there to end the strike as amicably as possible, or so you're told. And so you can hear what both of these people have to say, and either depending on what the playthrough you want or your own personal beliefs, you can side with one of them, and it impacts how you interact with the other characters throughout the game. And it's just so brilliant because both those characters, you interview both those characters, and you're like, yeah, you have a point regarding this specific thing, but you're also kind of wrong on this, and also you're kind of shitty. So I'm also kind of distrusting of you. And so it's so good.
Yeah.
Can we talk? Go ahead.
You first.
Can we talk about the graphics?
Oh, yeah,
How it
the
looks like a
visuals are
fucking
gorgeous.
storybook. It looks like
Everything's like, it feels hand painted.
yes.
Like everything. And like you were saying earlier, actually, one of the things I really like is the profile photos for the characters.
Yes.
They are less representation of what the character looks like and more about their mood. So like a lot of the art style will change from between character to character. Even like you said, you'll meet a character, they'll have just a normal profile picture, and then later you'll be in a different context and their profile picture will look drastically different. It'll still be them, but it'll be darker, heavily shaded. It really reflects the situation you're in a way that is just so cool, so artistic.
It is. And then the more, like, the game's art style and its sound design can actually lead to some pretty, not scary, but like in sequences where you're kind of on edge. For example, there's a sequence, and the sequence I'm referring to is where you go to the church.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're like, oh, no one's in here.
Except
Until the game says, no, you're not alone in there.
Except for
Something
the
else is there.
Vampire.
Vampire.
I think he goes by Nosferatu, or he looks Nosferatu. He's got like vampire fangs and vampire ears in his profile picture. But he's just some weird homeless guy who's crawling in the rafters.
I never got the Nosferatu. It was just, they called him a spider guy.
Oh, did you talk to him?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a whole conversation with him, and when he comes down, he he looks like Nosferatu, like stereotypically in his profile picture.
I'll have to look
And
at that.
he's just some dude. He's not like a literal vampire, but again, that kind of reflects like the weird, like the way you feel about a person affects the way they look, and that guy was weird. He was crawling around the rafters.
Oh, and speaking of that church series of events, I don't want to call it a sequence because you can really do it in any order. But
No.
the broken window of the religious idol, visual calculus. Oh my gosh, seeing that in its full glory is like, wow, that is very nice. Just visually, it looks nice.
You could also the dance side quest. Where
Yes.
you set up a rave in the church, and you have an authority roll to make Kim dance. And it's the best reason to ever put points in authority is to be like, as a superior officer, Kim, you have to dance.
And then Kim just dances, and
It's fun.
there's also an instance where two street rats are looking at Kim's car, and they're wearing jackets.
Oh.
And they have some very colorful words on those jackets.
Colorful words we cannot say on the podcast.
Or we could, just our editor is going to bleep it.
We're good. We don't have to say them.
Yeah, we're not going to make you do that. But you can actually have the same authority roll and have Kim wear the jacket.
Yes, you can make Kim wear one of the jackets.
And I love how before you can make him wear the jackets, you can actually ask Kim and force him to say, hey, which one would you wear? And Kim, one of Kim's dialogue is, I'd wear that one.
Kim's also just Kim is such a I would die for Kim. He is my favorite character. He is so good.
Kim is a real one.
Arguably like one of the best, like this is gonna sound super silly, but like one of the best gay represented characters ever. Like
He's gay?
yeah, he'll tell you if you talk to him about it. But like he doesn't he never goes like, I'm gay. Like, he doesn't explicitly talk about it all the time. But if you get to know him really well, he'll eventually open up about it, and you're like, that's so cool. It's like a real fucking human.
Two playthroughs. I never knew Kim was gay. Wow.
Yeah,
Like,
you start like if your stat rolls are bad when you go to ask him about his personal life, you're like, are you part of the homosexual underground? And Kim's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But if you do good rolls, you just have a normal conversation about it, and it's just genuinely like getting to know a person, and it doesn't feel shoehorned in or hokey in any way.
That's interesting because the only instance where I would ever think that Kim was gay was where, so in the very beginning of the game, you encounter a guy who was smoking a cigarette outside of his apartment, and he can see with very clear visual clarity the hanging. And so, the game's like, oh, Harry, you're feeling kind of something. Why is he so cool and whatnot? And then at some point you can tell Kim, man, this guy's just so cool. And Kim's just giving you shit. He's like, oh, yeah, you think he's cool.
Yeah, Kim gives you a real hard time about it.
And then so the game kind of makes it obvious that, yeah, you're attracted to that guy.
You think he's hot, just say it.
And then there are also instances where Harry's like, hey, woman, you should go on a date with me and whatnot. And so that one I do feel like kind of comes out of left or right field because it's like your attraction to this person comes out of nowhere.
Oh, yeah. No, you could just say all sorts of wild stuff to people.
And so...
I mean, I became a feminist in my third playthrough.
Oh, please. Okay, you've told me about this before, but please tell the viewers.
Okay.
Please, I beg you.
So at the beginning of the game, you wake up in your trashed hotel room, and when you go downstairs, the hotel manager starts yelling at you like, you fucking destroyed the room, you haven't paid rent, you got to pay me by the end of the day or you're out. You're homeless. And you can get out of that by talking to other people and being like, hey, there's a female, a woman employee, and if you talk to her, call her on the phone, she'll tell you how she just like, he asked her out and it made her like slightly uncomfortable. And that's it. That's really the whole thing. That's all she tells you. But you can come to him and be like, you asked one of your own employees out and you made her really creeped out. That's really messed up. And you could hammer down this feminist point about how he's a sex predator and a creep until he goes, okay, you don't have to pay your bill. And you don't have to pay the hotel bill. My first two playthroughs, I made money and to pay the bill. My third playthrough, I just harassed this dude and it unlocked the thought cabinet of being a feminist. So throughout the game, during dialogue, you could just randomly insert like little feminist quips here and there, just randomly to people.
Wow.
And it's brilliant. It's just like a whole entire dialogue tree that I never would have known existed if I hadn't done things in this one random specific order. And that's the whole game. It's like every playthrough, you just find new dialogue and new ways to interact with the world.
On that note, I think we should talk about the thoughts that you can internalize as Harry Dubois, because they give you some give you okay. So per your build, like for example, if you have your build a certain way, there are certain stats that you can only upgrade twice.
Yeah.
But if you internalize a specific thought where you can encounter by doing certain interactions and whatnot, if you internalize that thought, you can actually unlock that personality trait to be upgraded more than once, twice, or even 3 times. And so, but they affect you psychologically.
And they change the dialogue in the game. So you unlock thoughts by interacting with the world, and like you'll meet someone who is a racist, and you unlocked racism as a thought cabinet choice, where you can choose to become racist. And it opens up dialogue options with people who are racist that actually make parts of the game easier. But constantly, Kim will be like, hey, why are you racist? That's bad. Like, you'll constantly get shit on for being racist, and you can undo it. You can remove the racism thought. But the game will still acknowledge that you were racist for a little bit. So your character, I had Harry be like, I was only racist for a bit just to get by this one guy. And Kim's like, you don't get to just be temporarily racist. And you're like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. That is really a weird thing to say to someone.
It definitely is.
But yeah, the whole thought cabinet's super, super great. There's so many different weird, eccentric thoughts.
There's one about having your shit together. And it's kind of like it's kind of the game's introducing the player to the mechanic.
Yeah.
It's like, I gotta get my shit. Like, okay, you're trying to take down the corpse from the tree and you peek your brains out. And so Kim's like, hey, just take a minute. Get your shit together. And then we'll try this again. And so you can internalize the shot of shit togetherness, and it doesn't give you any base stat boosts, but it just kind of is like, hey, this is a mechanic. You should really try it. And then the artwork is it's like the artwork for each of the thoughts are so interesting, but at the same time you're like, this is kind of disturbing, but I can't look away.
Yeah, it's each artwork's like a little homunculus of the
Yes.
thought, the idea.
Yes.
And it perfectly represents the idea to you, where you look at the homunculus and you get it, but at the same time you're like, this is also kind of horrific looking.
Yeah, it's I don't want it to compare to this, but it also reminds me of the way those I Spy books and pages were designed,
yeah.
where it's like there's okay, to quote the meme from fucking that Star Wars Episode 3 producer, it is so dense. Every thought cabinet has so much going on, but unironically this time.
Yeah, and it represents the whole game. The whole game is dense. That's
Yes.
really the point. Like, it's so hard to describe this game because there's so much to it and everything's so varied. But that's really what sells the game, is the denseness. It really feels like a real world, and every playthrough feels so different, and the dialogue is so well written that you're always laughing or you're always engaged with what's going on.
Yes, and to tie this into autism, because there are certain I think in my first playthrough there was an instance where I didn't have enough stats in like social understanding or something, or like maybe it was drama, so where Harry couldn't tell where someone was being like exaggerating or someone was BSing you, and so the brain was like, hey, this guy is not doing, the guy seems upset, or the guy seems fine, even though the guy's like, no, I'm really upset. Your thought will be like, he's fine. There were genuine instances growing up where something like that happened, where someone was clearly upset. I'm like, oh, this guy's fine. Or the opposite, were like, oh, this guy's clearly upset, when the person's like, no, I'm fine.
They're
What
just
are you
egging
talking
you
about?
on. Yeah, they're being sarcastic.
Yeah,
Playing a joke.
and since all of these thoughts that the personality stats talk to you about are spoken and also on written down, it actually kind of, I can't say I relate to it, but it's like, yeah, no, this is something I've gone through. And
Yeah.
so it was nice to see, because like there weren't, I don't know if they were unintentionally trying to represent people who might not be socially 100%, but it was like, man, I sympathize with that.
No, yeah.
Unfortunately, though, the game is not all sunshine and rainbows, in the sense that behind the scenes,
Unfortunately, yes.
there was, the Disco Elysium was developed by a non-traditional studio, because they don't call the developers, at least the developers that's named on the Wikipedia page, they're called ZA/UM. I've heard by news people that it's called Zaum, but so they don't call themselves a developer. They call themselves a creative collective, whatever the fuck that means.
Yeah, they have that co-opt feel, where they're like a commune group.
Yes.
Where we all have equal share, except the publisher actually owns.
Well, to give some extra context, I guess they didn't have the funding or whatever to publish this game widely, so they did have to bring in a third-party publisher, and of course the third-party publisher was like, hey, we want money, we want it now, release it now. And so they're like, no. And so the heads of the creative commune of Zaum were like, screw this, fuck you. And after the game was out, apparently there were lawsuits, and the creative heads were like, we're no longer a part of Zaum. And we know that a lot of you are worried that this is going to impact the Disco Elysium sequel, because the game is open enough to where,
I want more games in this universe. It's so interesting.
I want a follow-up to
And
these.
more style. Like, I want this style of game.
Yes, I feel like the developers were just scratching the surface of what this system could do. The world they've established, I want to see more of. And like as Kim Kitsuragi says, no, something is happening in Revachol, and we need to be ready for it.
Yeah.
And so that is a tease if I've ever heard one. And so the fact that the original creative heads aren't going to be involved in that sequel just is heartbreaking.
Yeah, and from what I understand, or from what I read, I could be wrong, but the publisher owns the rights to Disco Elysium, the name. So they sold the rights to Amazon to make a TV show, which Disco Elysium is a riveting world, great dialogue. I could see it being a good TV show, but the whole point of the game is the variety of the character, the player interaction. You can't translate that to a TV show. It just doesn't work right.
Like, is it going to be...
And the art and the direction, like everything, you can't translate it to a real live-action TV show. It just wouldn't work.
like the only thing I can think like are these personality statistics going to be like an adult and schizophrenic version of the Disney movie Inside Out? Like
Maybe.
that's a genuine question.
I mean, that's not a bad direction to take it, but the sad part is that they lost the rights, so their next game in the Disco Elysium universe, the next Disco Elysium like game, won't be called Disco Elysium. It will technically not be in the same universe.
Yeah,
which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's kind of like how a bunch of creatives at the game studio Obsidian left Bethesda to create the game The Outer Worlds, which is essentially Fallout in space. So, but anyways, Disco Elysium, fantastic game. It's only on PC though, correct?
No, it's on consoles.
Okay.
I think it's on all of them, actually.
Okay, good. If you can get Disco Elysium, if you have the $60 to play it, play it.
Yeah.
It is incredible. You will not regret it.
It is a 10 out of 10, unmatched by any other game. There's nothing like it. It's so unique. I've played a lot of video games. I engage with a lot of different arts, a lot of different media. I can't think of anything like Disco Elysium.
It truly is in a league, class, and game of its own. And with that, Mr. Co-host extraordinaire, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Sperging Out Podcast. Like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the episode, I am the author. My name is Mitch Grace. I am the author of the book Growing Up with Asperger's: Lessons Learned in Shareable Wisdom, available on Amazon, on Kindle, and Amazon, and it's on Amazon on paperback, Kindle and paperback, available now. Thank you so much, Mr. Co-host, for joining me today.
You're welcome. I was glad to be here.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.